Right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's time for another exciting lightning talk. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm a managing director at InRhythm, and we have a lot of exciting content lined up for you in the upcoming weeks. Our lightning talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and each week, one of our practice area consultants speaks on the latest and greatest technology trends in the industry that will help you keep learning and growing in your career. And this week, Wei Fai, who is a passionate senior software engineer with us, is going to guide us through all the things that you need to know about web bundlers. And I'm looking forward to understand the best practices and all the alternatives available in the world of web bundling. So without further ado, let's get it started, Wei Fai.
Hi everyone, my name is Wai Fai and I'll be presenting on the web bundling alternatives. So let's get started with that. So the goal of this presentation is to give a brief introduction of a few of the available web bundlers out there. So first we'll go into a brief introduction on web bundlers. Then we'll take a look at a couple of web bundling options listed here, these 5 here. So first, what are web bundlers? Web bundlers are basically tools used to make the lives of developers easier. So one objective of the developer for the bundler is to transpile the code down into something that the browser can understand, and then encapsulate all that HTTP resource into a single web optimized output folder. This bundle can then be included on a web page to load the entire app at once. So there's 2 other ways that a bundler can provide support for the developer experience. First, by serving the files on an ad hoc HTTP server so that developers can interact with the built application on their local machine. And by providing that dev server, you can mimic the environment that the files will be hosted on. So users can just see this application change during the development process. The development server also watches for changes and recompiles just the changes automatically instead of manually rebuilding using the hot module replacement. It also provides some debugging support to troubleshoot issues with the code. And the second way is by preparing the application for the production release. So the bundlers can minify and compress the files by removing the unnecessary white spaces, new lines, comments, characters, and block delimiters without affecting the functionality. It also supports code splitting, so for code splitting, it creates multiple bundles that can be dynamically loaded at runtime. So you don't have to, so it will improve the performance of your application. And it also provides tree shaking, which statistically analyzes that code that you're importing, and it'll exclude anything that isn't actually used. So if it won't import the entire library, and it will just look at what you actually use and import the pieces of functionality within that library. So now we'll look into the web bundling alternatives. So here are a few of the web bundling options we have available. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is just 5 that I found was pretty popular and well thought of in the community. So in this graph, we can see the number of downloads over a year. And we do see that Webpack is definitely the clear winner here. But there are several alternatives that has their own advantages as well. So we'll go over some of those advantages and disadvantages of these 5 web bundlers. And we'll do some comparison of these bundlers too. The main criteria we're going to use for the comparisons: speed and package size. So we want a faster build speed and a smaller package size. So let's start off with Webpack. This is the most widely used bundler on that graph, and it's created in 2012 by Tobias Koppers. Its goal was to address the lack of tooling for complex single-page applications. And before Webpack, we managed the dependencies manually by concatenating blocks of JavaScript scripts. And that was really messy and it was hard to really use efficiently. So Webpack's solution was to create a dependency graph for all those assets in the website. And it could be used to efficiently pack into a small bundle later. it was really successful and it really rose to popularity in 2015. So the pros of Webpack is that it's highly customizable. We're able to add loaders and plugins, and the loaders are used to transpile these files down to something that a browser can understand. And the plugins, they tap into the compiler's lifecycle, and it adds functionalities directly into the compilation steps. So it also has a mature ecosystem with good documentation. So most of what features you're looking for that's available, you could find in Webpack. It also has functionality like module federation for the micro front-end architecture that some of the web bundlers are just beginning to adopt. Some of the cons include the complex configuration file. You can see the configuration file over here. It is quite long, and sometimes it has some regex that could be difficult to really understand. It also has slower build times for the dev and hot loading modules compared to other bundlers. So now we can look into a demo of Webpack. So for this demo, I'm just going to show, let me just tap into it. So I'm basically going to go over the package JSON, the configuration file, as well as run the build time and dev server for the dev server, and run the production build for the bundle size of that. So let's first look into the package JSON. So this demo has a very simple React application. It just has a H1 and P1 as well as a CSS. And I think this is mostly just to show what the bundler needs as dependency. So the only dependencies that this app really needed was React and React DOM. So everything else you see here is needed by this bundler. We can use the script for dev to serve our development server, as well as we can use the script to create our production bundle. Let's jump over to our config. So we have here the imports that we needed, the plugin definitions, the entry point of our application, the output of where we want to store our bundle, as well as the dev server information here. So we can specify the port. Here we have the loaders, and here we have the plugins. So this is the gist of the breakdown of most configurations in Webpack. So now let's look into the actual build of the dev server and see how that looks. So for here we can, so we're in the Webpack directory already. So let's just run the dev. Okay, so as you can see here, it compiled in 1,700 milliseconds, and I believe we can go into it. So yeah, so this is how the actual site works, or it looks. So one thing we can also do is we can test the hot reloading. So we can let's update this to have another p tag, and we can actually see how fast it takes for it to reload. So it only took 63 milliseconds. So it's actually really quick to reload it and show a change. So that's it for the demo of the Webpack bundler. Let's go back to the application presentation. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. So next we have Parcel. So Parcel was introduced in 2017 by Devin Govett to solve the frustrations of the growing complexity of building web applications and complicated configuration files. So the promise of Parcel is that it'll be a lot faster than Webpack, and it requires no configuration in most cases. So the pro is that it is actually faster than default Webpack. So we can see that in the demo later. Parcel is also really easy to configure and offers out-of-box support for common project assets like JavaScript, CSS, HTML. So we wouldn't need like the loaders and plugins as we saw in our configuration file for Webpack. See. And the con is that as the project does get more complicated, extra configurations may be needed, such as SVG support, and some features it doesn't support altogether, like module federation right now. So there are some cons for Parcel, but let's jump into the demo just to see how it is used. Let me close out this. I'm going to make a new. Okay, I'll make a new terminal here, and then we can go into Parcel package.json. So in this package.json, you can see that we only really needed Parcel and process for our dependencies, and the script just has the Parcel and then the entry point, and the build script just included build as well as the entry point. So we didn't even need a configuration file. There's no configuration file here, and it's actually really simple to set up. So we can run the script here. Okay, so this built in 1 second, which is a bit faster than how much is that? It was 1.7 seconds. So it is a bit faster. And we can jump into localhost and see that it is there. Let me just jump out of that. And we can also do a quick change to the application to see if the hot reloads. So it did take a bit longer than Webpack to rebuild, but it's still really quick. Okay, actually, I realized I didn't build a production file for Webpack. So let me quickly do that now. Run prod, I believe. So this just shows the size of the production file that we want to use to compare later on. And I believe it is. So it's stored in this file, so we could probably use this. So it's actually 140 kilobytes. So this is the size of the folder itself. The file is 138, but the folder is 140. So the bundle is that size. And we can quickly do that as well for Parcel. So let me just look at the package.json for it again. It's build. Build. Okay, so this one actually tells you the size, which is pretty much the same as well, 140 kilobytes. Cool. So let's jump back to our slides. So the next web bundler we're talking about will be Rollup. So Rollup was created in 2018 by Rich Harris, which is the creator of Svelte, to build lean bundles of JavaScript libraries as efficiently as possible. So this is done by taking advantage of the ES6 modules to analyze the code being imported and perform precise tree shaking. So the ES6 modules enable a different approach, or the ES6 modules in the browser allows Rollup to perform a different approach than what has been done with Webpack. So all the code's put into the same place, and it's evaluated in one go. So it results in some leaner, simpler code that starts up faster as well. Rollup uses a plugin ecosystem where you would just use individual plugins that you need for extra functionality. And many developers have mentioned that they use Rollup to build libraries, as it doesn't have the boilerplate code like Webpack does. So some pros are that there's simpler configuration than Webpack. There's automatic tree shaking, and so it should have a smaller file size than Webpack, as Rollup does use scope hoisting, which is similar to what we were talking about before, where we combine the modules rather than wrapping each module in a function, which adds that overhead. Cons is that it's less customizable in configuration, and so you can't turn on some built-in functions like code splitting. So I think there were issues where some of the plugins actually didn't want code splitting, and there were errors if that happened. And right now, there's no way to turn it off. So let's jump into a demo of Rollup. Let me see if I can just open a new one. Oh, that's not what I want. Okay, well, let's go into Rollup. Okay, so in Rollup, so the package.json file, it actually has quite a few dependencies because of all of the plugins I had to use. It was actually pretty difficult for me to use when I tried it out myself, but it might be because I wasn't familiar with all the plugins, and I had to choose exactly which plugin I wanted for the for each loader and plugin. And yeah, so it does need a configuration file as well, and you would just put that into the start for the dev server, the build for the production bundle. And looking at the Rollup configuration, we do import quite a few plugins here, and here's our source of entry. Here's the output files, and then all of these are the plugins used. But the cool thing is that in the plugins, you can specify quite a few options. So this is like the plugin for the dev server. You can just specify which one, what the options are here, as well as like the plugin for the minifier. So let's run the commands for the scripts. npm runs start. Okay, so here is our bundle. So it took about 3 seconds to create. So it was a bit slower than, I guess, both ESLint. I mean, both not ESLint, both Webpack and Parcel. So this is the slowest one I've seen, but maybe it's because of the setup. And then we can see if it can do reloading. So I don't think it reloaded. I think I didn't set up the functionality for hot module reloading for this, and I think so. Yeah, it won't work. But let's look at the production build size. Run build. Okay, so the size of this build is actually, so it's 295 kilobytes, and I feel like we would expect it to be smaller because that's what was or smaller than Webpack and Parcel. But in my case, I feel like this was a bigger file than both of those. So let's go back to the bundlers, or to the presentation. So the next web bundler we have is ESBuild, And ESBuild was actually created in 2020, so really recently, by Evan Wallace to address the slowness of bundling JavaScript. It's written in Golang, so it's faster than JavaScript written bundlers like Webpack. And this graph from the ESBuild homepage actually shows where they tested some of the bundlers with each other. And there is a significant speed difference between ESBuild and all of the other bundlers as shown here. So yeah, so the pro is that it is much faster than the other bundlers. And the con is that it is missing several key features like code splitting, CSS content type. And there are limitations to the plugins that they have right now, because right now it says that on the page, it actually says that the API doesn't intend to cover all the use cases. So it's not possible to hook into every part of the bundling process. And I don't think it will be, because I think that's not part of the future plans for now. So yeah, so that is ESBuild. Let's look into how to start it and the build for it. Let me jump out of this. So in ESBuild, let's look at the package JSON. It's actually quite a few dependencies. Well, quite few dependencies. We just need ESBuild and a few plugins here. And then there, I guess we can either run the script tag itself, or we can run a config file. So in the config file, this is how it would look. So you just import the plugins, you define the entry point, you define the place to store the bundle, your plugins, as well as some features are built into ESBuild, such as minify and source maps. So we can run one of these. I think let's just run the start, the serve. I mean, this is the dev server. So let's jump out of Rollup and go to ESBuild, and we'll run start. It didn't tell me the time, but hold up. Let me see if there's a way to find a time. Start to. Actually, I had thought there was a place for the time, but yeah, it was actually really quick. Let's see if I can jump here. Okay. Hmm. 34 milliseconds. So it got the bundle in 34 milliseconds. So maybe it's this is the time it takes to fetch it. And let's see. So if I do a change, we can see the time for that as well. Okay. So I don't think my dev server currently supports refreshing or hot reloading. So that does not work right now. Okay, but let's go into the build. So let's do run build. Okay, so you can see that the build actually is actually really quick. Usually the build takes longer than the dev server itself. So in this case, it only took 72 milliseconds. And the size is actually smaller than the other ones where it was 140 kilobytes. So that's actually really cool because this actually built out the source file as well, which I believe makes it should make it much slower, but it was still faster than the rest of the bundles we tested so far. So ESBuild definitely wins in that margin. So let's go back to the presentation. So next we have Vite. So this was created in 2020 by Evan Yu. He's also the creator of Vue.js, and this is a build tool that aims to provide a faster, leaner development experience for modern web projects. So Vite actually takes advantage of the fact that the modern browsers natively support ES6 modules. So as the code contains only native ES6 modules, the browser will take these ES6 modules and just parse the file while looking for the import statements that it needs to serve the specific modules as needed. And if you look at the images here, the traditional bundlers in the dev environment, they usually compile all the modules and serve them up in a bundle. But in the Vite development environment, it doesn't actually compile all the modules. It just serves the route, and then the server, the browser can actually ask for the modules to serve up, so it can quickly serve those up and not need to serve up the entire bundle of modules. Some pros are that they have quick, hot module replacements. There's faster bundling times, as it does use ESBuild behind the scenes to pre-bundle the large dependencies. There's automatic code splitting or CSS code splitting, so you only load the CSS that your page really needs. There's multi-page support out of the box, and there's templates for popular frameworks, so you can get started really quickly with Vite. Another thing is that it actually uses Rollup behind the scenes for production build too, and I think like generally Rollup has a smaller package size and is cleaner in that sense. So the cons are that since different tools are used for bundling the development and production code, so ESBuild is used for development bundle and the production bundle is using Rollup. There are cases, rare cases, where the different tools could result in bugs that are hard to debug, where the code can run fine during the development server, during development with the development server, but after it's bundled in production, there might be kinks of the feature not working as intended. So let's jump into a demo of Vite here. So let's get out of here. Okay. So in Vite, let's look at the package JSON. I actually built this bundle using one of the templates for React. So it's actually optimized for React right now. So there's not that many plugins we really needed. It did get the types for TypeScript, but for the most part, we just needed these plugins here. The dev build is just Vite, and the build for production is Vite build. And we do have a configuration file, but it's actually really small. So we import the plugin here, we import Vite, or import the defined configuration, and then we just set up the server, and then we just use the React plugin. So it's all pretty simple to use. I think if you wanted to add more plugins, you can add it here, but for the most part, everything for React is needed here. So let's run the build server. Well, let's run the dev server. I can run them. Okay, so it took about 2.8 seconds. So I think it's a bit slower than Webpack. But let's go into it. That's how it looks, and then let's see how fast it takes to do the hot loading. Okay, it doesn't actually say, but it felt really quick. So, but let's look at the bundle size as well. So it does use parcel in the back for this production build. So we'll see how well it fares here. Build. Okay, so the size is it's also about 139 or 140. So so it's about the same as the rest other than parcel. So yeah, that's interesting because we are using parcel in the backend too, or in the build as well. But let's jump back to the slides. Okay. Yeah, so in conclusion, there are these are just a few of the web bundlers out there. Here's also a summary of the bundler. So when I initially ran Webpack, it took about 5 seconds, but in this case, it actually took really quick, which I think is because I already bundled it. So I might have to redo that test. But my initial build for Webpack took 5.6 seconds. And yeah, I hope that this presentation made you interested enough to give these bundlers a chance in your side projects. I'm personally interested in using either Parse or Vite since it's actually really quick. And it uses like ES build and rollup. Well, at least Vite uses ES build and rollup. So I'm interested in just trying these out in my next projects. So hopefully encourage you all to try them out as well. And that is it for my presentation. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to do something like that myself, and it was really cool to see your presentation. The ES build, when I saw it only take 70 milliseconds or so, that is really compelling. I was just wondering, if I'm mostly working with React and vanilla JavaScript, I was paying attention to the drawbacks, but do any of them pop out to you when you might not use ES build with React or vanilla JS? Or maybe you can go over the drawbacks again.
Yeah. I think right now it didn't support code splitting. And I think code splitting was supported by a lot of the other bundlers where it's able to split the code in a way that it's dynamically loaded instead of having all of the code loaded at once. So it's just faster for the dev server. I think like the plugin limitations was one I saw as well on their site actually, and it says that we can't use plugins for each piece of the bundling process. I think there's like different stages of the bundling process, so you can't interject into within the steps of the bundling process, which could be done by I think like Webpack and Rollup. So those are some of the drawbacks I saw on their site. So
okay, yeah, I'm probably gonna start trying it, and until I reach a snag, I'm gonna try and keep using it. So
yeah, definitely.
cool.
Yeah, it's so quick too. So I felt like that was like a game changer there.
Really cool.
Mm-hmm.